Let's do some type. Let's go to the type tool, and I'm going to click in the bar here, and you'll see that there's a little dot with a flashing line there, meaning Photoshop is waiting for us to start typing in stuff here. So I will type in her name, E-L-A-I-N-E. I believe her last name is Gruenke, G-R-U-E-N-K-E. And I'm going to tell Photoshop I'm done typing right now. You can do this a couple of ways. If you have an extended keyboard, you're looking for the Enter key that's on the very right-hand side of the keyboard with all the numbers over there. That's your 10 keypad for all your numerics. You want to hit the Enter key there, or you can just hit the check mark up here. Okay, now we've got a problem. We've got a type layer here, yes, but we can't see what's going on here. So what we're going to do is highlight this. Now I'm going to actually take note of this. Look what's happening here. This is something you should know anyway. But as I move my cursor around, look what's happening. It's basically like an insert bar that you might find in Microsoft Word. I mean, not surprisingly, because this is a typography tool, right? But there's also kind of a marching ant, little dashed dots around there. Now, what that means is if I click here, Photoshop wants to make a new layer, new type layer. Okay, so that box tells you it wants to make a new layer. Well, that's not what I want, so I'm going to cancel this. See the little international cancel sign? Okay, but look what happens. As I get close to where my type was, that box goes away. So what it means is I can click and drag and highlight all those letters there. Now we can't see anything, but we know it's highlighted. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the swatches, and I'm going to choose a light color like this yellow. Okay, and now I'm going to also tell Photoshop I'm done by clicking on the check mark, boom, and there you have it. So that's one way to change the color. I could just go up here into the color chip for the type. Now this is different from this kind of a thing. I'll just tell you right now, I know this won't make any sense. This type of typography, this is called vector-based artwork, and it usually comes with its own color chip. But we could feasibly go over here and do something like this, or even change the hue and click OK, and now we've got a different color. That's the way that works. Let's talk more about what we can do with our type tool. Now we've got a bunch of things going on here. Now by default, Photoshop plays and wants to use Myriad Pro, and that's okay. But you could change all the fonts here. We might change it to Nueva. We might change it to Opus, which aren't terribly different. We could try Orator Standard. It's a little bit more computery, but we'll stay with, what is the name of that thing? I've just said it. Myriad Pro. Thank you. Right there. Okay. Now there are styles that come with these fonts. Light condensed, semi-bold, bold condensed. So we can try some different styles out to see if we like it. We've got our point size. Now this menu it has a list of sizes, and it goes up to 72, but you're not limited to 72, okay? There's actually a couple ways you can do this. We could type in a number. We could highlight that number and maybe go to 100 and hit enter or return, and it's now 100 points, okay? But here's a trick that people do in Photoshop that's very, very cool, and it's not dependent upon the menu, but what you can do is, see how my cursor turns into that hand with the finger? Do you see how the finger has like these arrows going left and right? I can click and drag here. Hopefully this tooltip will go away in just a second. There we go. Now when I click left or right, that number will change. So I could crank it down all the way over here because I'm still clicking and dragging, and I could drop this off at 15, and that works great. We'll talk about anti-aliasing and sharpness and some of this other alignment stuff later. I do want to introduce you to this tool. This is actually a panel. So we'll click on the panel and look what happens. This is called the character panel, which also lives with the paragraph panel. And this is about alignment and such. The one thing I wanted to bring your attention to, however, is some of these tools down here. there's some really cool tricks. And I'll just briefly mention that we're just going to click on this one here. This is for all caps. So even though I wrote E capital and G capital for her name, if I were to click on this guy right here, this will actually make all the letters capitalized, just like that. Here's something I'd like you to start thinking about now, because I know most of you have some computer experience and you're used to highlighting things when you want to make a change. But you don't always have to when it comes to type. Okay, so for instance, let's say that I want to maybe make a change to the first letter. So I'll highlight the first letter, and maybe I'll make that a different size. We'll give that maybe 24 points. It looks ugly, but that's not the point. Okay, so I'll tell Photoshop I'm done with that change. Great. Okay, the only time you have to go in and select stuff like this is if you're going to change just some of the components of that layer. So I might just highlight this whole thing, and I can still make this all a different size. So we'll make this 12 point, maybe a little bit smaller. Okay, but if I wanted to make a change to the entire layer, I don't have to select anything. Here's why. First, I'll tell Photoshop I'm done. Okay, and at this point, Photoshop still has this selected. It doesn't look like it, does it? But it does, because it's selected over here. Photoshop says, oh, this entire layer is selected. So now, when I want to make a change, notice how there's no number here. That's because it's confusing for Photoshop to realize that some of the components have one size and some of the components have a different size. Well, we don't care about that because we're going to, oops, I accidentally changed the font. What we want to do is just change the size so that all of the items in that particular layer will be the same size. So we'll drop this at 14, and that's all you have to do. And I tell you this because as we go through the quarter, I find students trying to, and having difficulty, trying to highlight the entire text layer when they don't have to. It's already selected for you. Okay, so the only time I recommend actually going in and trying to click and highlight something is when you only want to change a smaller sub part of the layer that you're working on. Okay, and the last thing about typography, and for this I will go back to a different window. We'll throw this all away. Okay, so we're still using the type tool. There's two different kinds of type layers. There's point type or headline type, and there's body copy. So let me demonstrate what the difference is. Okay, let's say that I just do a simple click right over here, and I just start typing. Well, actually, you know what would help is if we had a color that was useful. So I'll make this black. Okay, so I'm typing, and this line never ends. This is just one big headline to Photoshop, and that can be useful. I'll tell Photoshop I'm done. And this is called point type. And the other thing is body copy. Now for body copy, I will not just merely click to get a point. I will click and drag to get a box. Now I still got that flashing insert, and the same thing qualifies. I can just keep on typing. But notice what happens here is it wraps around once it reaches the limits of the box. It's pretty, isn't it? Okay, and what's also neat is that if actually I'll tell Photoshop I'm done here for just a moment. Okay, now let's say that I want to change the size of the box or make some sort of change. Notice how my cursor changes. I'll click inside the box. That brings up the boundaries, and I can maybe grab a corner and change the width, and the type will accommodate me. Try that again. It's a little fussy about where you push it. There we go. So I'll push this in, and it changes around, and then I can tell Photoshop I'm done. Okay. Now there's more to typography than that, but this is going to get you a good start.